Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to the event. The Network is the Solution, a strategic dialogue on data science and knowledge network for a circular economy. If I may invite those who are sitting at the back to come closer so that we are all a little bit more connected also among ourselves. And again, welcome to everybody to the event. I know there may be some others joining, but let's start our conversation and recognize and thank the initiatives that have been behind this event and pulling this event together, including GGKP, the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership, GACERE, the Global Alliance for Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency, the Life Cycle Initiative and the International Resource Panel, and ultimately also the One Planet Network. Thank you to all those who have materialized this event and enabled this space for conversation. And also big thanks to the European Union. Thanks to its generous support, we have been able to materialize this event. But let me jump directly into the why we are together here for this conversation. And I'll just, I'm really big on this screen, guys. And I'm just going to go back to the last UN Environment Assembly, where a report that we refer to as the Global Resources Outlook 2024 was launched and was reminding us a lot of the data that will be behind our conversation today. It reminds us how much we are relying on the extraction of new resources for our economies, for our production, for our consumption, for our trade. And that report was also highlighting that this continued extraction of resources is responsible for 55% of greenhouse gas emissions, 40% of health impacts from particulate matter, and 90% of land-related biodiversity loss. And that if we do not change this trend, our consumption of resources will actually be doubling in the period 2015-2060. And in a number of conversations that have been convened also in the UN Environment Assembly, one of the solutions to bend this trend, to revert this trend, has been pointed to as being applying more circularity, more circular approaches to the way in which we produce and we consume, indicating that these offers opportunities for business growth, for economic growth, also for employment. Earlier this week, the International Labour Organization launched a report that looks specifically into the jobs opportunity associated with circular economy. And therefore, with all those arguments to the table and with a lot of conversations that have already happened in relation to circular economy, with the data that several initiatives, including the International Resource Panel, are putting on the table in relation to the opportunities of circular economy. The question that we still want to debate with you today is really, how do we transform that knowledge and that insight into policies and into action on the ground? Because what we equally know is that while we have very strong data that can guide our decision, we do not see equivalent scale of action on the ground. So what will be the core of our conversation today will be very much around how can we use a lot of the data that exist in several platforms to drive actions in relation to policy, and what are the good practices that are already here in the room, and how we can also use that policy driver to create collaboration along value chains with industries to really take this transformation to circularity to scale. And what are the good examples that are already there that can inspire us, but what more needs to be created among ourselves to really reach that scale. And this is very much the structure of the conversation that we are going to have today. We will first, in the first session, reflect on the challenges and obstacles to achieving scale that we are experiencing. In the following session, we will understand more of the existing approaches, data-driven approaches to drive policy transformation, and also to engage different actors across value chains, including the finance sector, to conclude by looking a little bit more in depth in some of the platforms that already exist to exchange knowledge and to create the connections. So we're really very much hoping that this, besides being an opportunity to exchange information, it's also an opportunity for us to connect and to bring some of the ideas that we're going to share on the ground into action. But without taking further time from my side, I have the honor of introducing two colleagues, Adriana and Rula, who are respectively the Global Subprogram Coordinator, Adriana for Finance and Economic Transformation, and Rula for Science Policy Subprogram, because they will be taking you by the hand, with your hand, throughout the agenda of today and facilitate all the discussion. Adriana and Rula, if I may invite you to come here to the podium, and I'll hand the floor to you for the rest of the session.
Thank you, Elisa, and thanks, Rula. So I'm Adriana Zacarias, is the Global Coordinator of Finance and Economic Transformation, is one of the sub-programs of UNEP, and I'm very happy to be with my colleague Rula.
Rula Caliubi, and Subprogram Coordinator for Science Policy, and glad that you're here taking your Sunday time off to be here.
We really appreciate that. I'm happy to see you here. So we will start with panel 1 and 2. So we will invite our dear panelists, and we are so honored that you are with us. So please, if I can invite Andrea Hengwood, our Chief Scientist of UNEP, to join us in the panel. Charles Nyandinga, who is the Regional Team Lead on Environment of UNDP, and coming from Ethiopia, and he's here with us today. And our youth delegate, Maurice Mulita, who is a member of the Children and Youth Major Group for UNEP.
Thank you, Adriana. For our second panelist, I'm delighted to have Ms. Sally Radwan. She is the Director of the Digital Transformation Subprogram, and she is the Chief Digital Officer at UNEP. Please. Also, I'm very pleased to have Mr. Adam Stigmore. He's the Chief Development Officer Standard at Australia for ISO. And he talks about the role of standards in environmental data. And Ms. Shakira Parker, she is Senior Policy Advisor at the International Governance Management at the Department of Forestry and Fishery in South Africa. Please, a warm welcome to the 6 panelists.
Excellent. So welcome again. And thank you, Lisa, for setting the scene. In this panel, in the first one, we really want to talk about how can we bridge science and policy to accelerate circular economy. And I'm very happy, Andrea, to have you here because, as you know, UNEP is a science-based organization. And I think our daily work is to connect science into policy for action. So, Andrea, can you please tell us more about that? How can we bridge this gap? Because we know there are some.
Okay, thank you very much. And nice to see you all here and talking about this important topic. I guess at the outset, the science behind circular practices is actually not easy. It's not easy technically and economically. Why? because it's actually not easy to change. So one of the things that we know is that there is lots of innovation out there and some scientific and technical solutions to make our practices more circular, but actually they're a bit challenging. And one of the things we also know is that we do have some great examples at small scale and across diverse value chains. But globally, it's still really limited, as we've already heard. And I think one of the things from my perspective is we do need to understand the scientific and technical feasibility of some of the things we are actually dealing with. What am I talking about here? If we talk about metals and we talk about rare earths, at the moment, only 1% of rare earth elements, which are needed for our solar panels and a whole range of other electronic equipment, is recycled. 1% is a pretty small amount. And of course, demand is increasing, putting pressure on land and other resources. And one of the things we also know, though, is just actually looking at scientific and technical feasibility isn't enough. We actually need to engage different stakeholders across the value chain. And I want to talk about the classic example from a regulatory perspective. So the science says we need to deal with waste. We need to stop landfilling it. So what do? We, as a regulator, we actually put in place a landfill levy to make it more expensive to dispose of the waste. The purpose is actually to drive circular practices because you're trying to make it so expensive to dispose of it, you want to actually then repurpose the waste into other materials. What this requires is actually an understanding of different stakeholders' perspectives across the value chain, engaging those at every stage of the process, because the classic example of what happened when you apply in a particular context I won't talk about was that it became a nefarious activity where waste was actually disposed of inappropriately and actually housed in warehouses and burnt, creating other environmental challenges. So the key to a science policy interface is the science must be solid and there, but you must engage stakeholders across the process to actually affect the change you want. And importantly, to ensure you understand the drivers for the different parts of the value chain and what will change behavior. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. And let me just a follow-up question, because we were discussing this particular example. And I think you were in our conversation saying that what was missing there was also the understanding on what is circular economy or the definition that we are giving to waste, right? Because you are saying the economic incentive is there, but what was missing in that example?
So the feedback from the industry is don't call it waste, call it a resource. And actually, when you engage with the sector and in terms of driving the innovation, the technologies that can actually make something more circular, you have to give it a value. If you're calling it waste, you're already deciding it's something you don't want. If you call it a resource, so maybe we've got this round the wrong way. Maybe everything is a resource, and then it's about how you then deal with it. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, that's very important. Also a key obstacle in the trade. So let me now turn to my colleague, Charles Indiga, as I say, from the UNDP. How is this perspective? What are the challenges you are also facing in accelerating circular economy and connecting science into policy making and action?
Thank you so much. I think this is a pertinent question, and coming from a development agency, we tend to look at this in the development angle. In other words, the challenges that relates to how development outcomes can be impacted if we do not close the science policy gap. So that is an important consideration for us because, you know, if you look at all the triple planetary crises that we are all talking about now, we just came out of COP30, and there are so many things that are related to the COP, the UN 80 was just the other day. So quite a number of discussions are going on that affect livelihoods and resilience. So looking at the value chains, to look at what is already taking place, and I think the first speaker has already mentioned around the fact that these are not waste, they are really some other types of resources. And the more positively we look at that, and the better. Even the issues around pollution that we talk about may not necessarily be pollution, because you can turn around some of those issues into a productive economic activity. So we are looking at that. And secondly, from the UNDP side, the importance of having, feedback loops helps us de-risk decisions and speed up adoption. Data and the co-creation of pilots, for example, many of the things that we start as development projects starts as pilots. And those are the ways that we generate data and develop standards, which then goes ahead to influence policy and then determine the investments that we take. So if you want to develop pipelines or programs around that same thing, you will have to be relying on the fact that you have tested them, tried them, and found how best you can utilize those resources. So in short, that's what I can say. Thank you.
Charles, and let me stop, also come back to you as a follow-up question. You mentioned something very important, the creation of feedback loop. So how do you ensure or create those feedbacks in a specific value chain?
Yeah, I think one has to start by understanding the stakeholder that are involved in the value chain itself, in whatever activity you're looking at across the industry. And once you understand those stakeholders' engagement processes, as well as their roles and responsibility, and how they influence each other, then of course you can look at how those feedbacks relates and feed into each of those players and actors. So the feedback loop are very important in ensuring that you can learn, that you can take advantage of lessons, and that you can move forward from an informed baseline. And this is, I think, is very important if you are going to have a way to utilize all the resources across the value chain. And so there's nothing called waste as far as I'm concerned. And I think the first speaker has mentioned that. Everything else becomes useful and becomes important. It just depends on how you want to utilize it, how you want to turn it around. And that, of course, depends on how you relate to what has happened in the previous levels of engagement within the same chain. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let me now move to our youth representative. I'm happy that Maurice Molitu is with us. I think some of you attending the Open and the CPR, and pretty now you see that every time the voice of the youth is more vocal, is stronger. So I'm very happy. So Maurice, tell us, how is this aspect of bringing science into action seen from the perspective of the youth?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So from a youth perspective, I believe many youths are very, very much endowed with technology. So we have been using ChatGPT, DeepSeek, and all those models. I believe averagely in Kenya, the average age is 17 or around 18. And I believe most of them are technologically well endowed to find avenues to access artificial intelligence models and all that. So they are very much informed on policies about circular economy, climate, and all that. However, I believe the government itself or stakeholders in the implementation stage are not doing justice to tackle the problem that we have. Every actionable policy must rely on real data. And for you to come up with a real policy, maybe then you need to predict what will happen in 50 years or 20 years from now. So maybe you already have the data, but there's no way for you to predict the effect of your actions in the near future. For example, where I come from, Kenya, the government is rolling out a project to plant, I believe, 50 billion trees and such, but there's no way of predicting the effect, whether positive or negative, to the environment. We are not able to know whether the temperature on the earth is going to lower by 5 degrees, 2 degrees, or such. So we just do good things, but we do not have a prediction model to know whether the policy we are implementing is going to have good enough effect, because we cannot know based on the current data, because we are not putting into action to create useful insights. And from that, our policy is not grounded on probable facts. So we just have the data, but the policy is not backed by the data that we have. And from my youth perspective, I believe the youth are the ones with better insights and the technology to create that feedback loop system, and maybe to come up with better ideas that are up to time, and we should consider them in the feedback loop system, as my friend DH has stated. And yeah, that's what I would say.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm glad you mentioned artificial intelligence and the ChatGPT. I'm next to Sally, and she will tell more about that in the next panel. But let me go to a second round of questions to our panelists. And Andrea, I'm glad at the beginning you were saying that also science has to help us in analyzing the feasibility of science and technology. So my question is, based on that, what are the strategies or the enabling conditions that might be most effective in helping us in the uptake of circular economy?
So we need to provide accessible information that is available for people to actually take up. And I want to pick up the point of my panelists. It also needs to be integrated. So the science is one bit, the technical and scientific feasibility is an aspect. Can I actually extract, reuse, repurpose, recycle this particular element? So let's take the case of bisphenol A in stockings. I never knew that bisphenol A or bisphenol S was actually added to stockings. And what's interesting about that is that stockings, however, have all sorts of formulations. So you can extract the bisphenol, and which apparently is a useful chemical. It's also a pollutant that causes a whole range of issues. But if you want to do that, you have a whole lot of other substances there, and different manufacturers actually are making the stockings with different additives, which means when you extract it. So what we actually need to do is to get some coherence and some science into some of these products and our ability to deal with some of the complex nature of the products that we've got. And we need to make that available. Then we marry that with the economics, but also the behavior changes. As I mentioned before, when you've got a, let's say, less than good corporate citizen, let's call them Dodgy Brothers Incorporated, who want to act in a particular way, we need to work out then what is the incentive and the motivation for that type of entity to change what they're doing. And that then engages the range of stakeholders to actually work out what the system and what the circular practices could be to address that. And I think, so we're marrying the science with the economics, with behavior change, but engagement with stakeholders and making the information accessible so that people can actually understand some of these issues.
Excellent and beautiful. I really agree. And thank you so much for bringing the importance of the behavioral change. So Charles, from your perspective also, what are those good strategies, enabling conditions that we can use to accelerate the uptake of circularity?
Thank you so much. I think from the experiences we have with various stakeholders, engagements that we have within the UN, particularly with UNDP, which is a development agency, we notice that multi-stakeholder platforms, for example, are very good ways in which we can institutionalize cross-value chain interfaces. And so we probably need to avoid ad hoc projects, which is the typical way that we do development agenda in many cases. So that, a project itself adds value to an organized, institutionalized platform. And we have had good examples. For example, in Ghana, the UNDP established a multi-stakeholder waste recovery platform in 2017, and which has become now, as we speak, a foundation for the transformation of Ghana's ecosystem for circular economy development. So we see this as a very important entry point in terms of developing a strategy that is lasting, sustainable, that embraces everybody's desires and aspirations. And then, of course, the importance of having a common data standards, ethical digital infrastructure. So by having a standardized methods and data sets, and investing in an open digital public good so that results are comparable over time. So I think these are two critical areas that strategies should be able to embrace. So whatever strategy you develop, it has to have all these as pertinent ingredients in moving it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for highlighting the multi-stakeholder engagement and also emphasizing what Andrea was also saying, the importance of this integration, coherence, having standards that again were developed, as you're mentioning, collectively. So Maurice, over to you then. What are those enabling conditions that you think would help in accelerating the uptake of circularity?
I think number one is they need to mostly educate people on what circularity is really. Because from a young people's perspective, we do understand what it is, but probably we do not have a way of practicing what we already know. So there's no platform for that, for us to maybe participate in ensuring circularity is a key component of our life. For example, in Kenya, most startups in the circularity space are run by young people, but there's no proper engagement with probably the government or NGOs. So we work in silos. So I know a founder and I know another founder. They work together, but there's no proper mechanism to engage either UNEP or the government for them to accelerate their ventures into actionable ideas that can be helpful to the rest of the world or to the rest of the country. And therefore, our good ideas die within our brains or within our minds. So I would come up with a mechanism whereby we can probably showcase our initiatives, our innovations, and all that. Maybe funding and probably support in terms of policy, whereby we can have a UNEP or a UN or a government initiative to create enabling environments for circularity ideas among the youth and among the young people to make their ideas into startups or initiatives that create positive impact to the environment and to the rest of us. And probably back to my point about a prediction model. When we talk about circularity, it's something which is affecting us every day, but we kind of need to know how it will look like in 20 or 50 years. So we kind of need to predict what we should do now for us to achieve a certain status in 50 years. If you want to maybe remove plastic waste in Nairobi by 2030, what actions do we need to take in 2025 or in 2026? Do we need to ban plastics in Kenya? Banning it, is it enough to maybe achieve a certain degree of no plastics in Kenya? Are we supposed to partner with another country or another organization? What is lacking is a prediction model. So maybe we have big dreams. We have Vision 2030, Vision 2050, but we do not know whether our initiatives or our steps will achieve whatever we need to do because we cannot predict currently. And I think that was lacking. We have the data, the prediction is not accurate, and sometimes it's not there. Therefore, our insights are not put into good use, and therefore our policy might not be grounded on valuable data. So that was, I would, yeah.
Thanks, Maurice, and thanks for putting this example in Kenyan plastics. And I think you illustrated very well, no? Breaking silos, and then you come to the vision. Where do we want to be? And I think, Andres, where the science comes and say, okay, this is feasible. If we don't do anything, we will be here. If we do something, it's feasible to move there. But then again, how through action, multi-stakeholders, we can pave the way. So thank you so much. With this, we finish panel 1. But I just want to highlight that you all have mentioned the importance that, and it's also something that the organizers of this side event are doing. You know, we have the International Resource Panel that is bringing science, is creating different scenarios of where we will be based on the use of our natural resources. We have the knowledge GKP, the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership that is bringing the science into action, and then the One Planet Network working with governments. And what we want, as you were saying, is breaking those silos, trying to enhance multi-stakeholder cooperation and really bring science into action. So with this, I will hand over to my colleague Rula, and we will pass to the panel 2. So Rula, over to you. And thank you very much. And let me please big round of applause to our panelists.
For our next panelists, it actually pays to do a quick route because our valued time need to be put in perspective. So Elissa has summarized for us that it is about the use of data to policy and action, and use the policy drivers along the value chain to scale. Andrea told us to actually we have challenges, but we can bridge the gap of the info. Charles, through the developing agencies, say we can look at co-creation and to look at the feedback loop. Morse, he mentioned that we have technology and we have to employ for the future. For our second panelist, we're very fortunate to have some spotlight presentations showcasing how innovative data strategies, standards, ISO certifications, and South African probably example about how we use data for policy. So Sally, with that, I turn to you for your presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Rhoda, and thank you all for being here today. I just want to start by, reiterating what we heard from Morris in the first panel on the importance of ideas and the importance of involving young people. At UNEP, we actually ran a hackathon for young people in Kenya a few months ago, and the response was overwhelming. We had more than 1,000 participants from all over Kenya. And one of the winning ideas was actually really, really cool project on circularity and solid waste and how we can monetize them to make it economically viable for people to engage in that industry. So yeah, we'll be doing more of that, I think. Now, we talked about data. We can go to the next slide, please. So we heard a lot of this in the first panel, right? There are challenges around data. There's lack of interoperability between data sets that doesn't always allow you to create the kinds of insights and predictions and complex use cases that you really need for decision support. There seems kind of a rift between data that is generated and data that is actually used and deployed for policy making, and many, many other issues around data accessibility, affordability, collectability, if I can put it like that, because that's always, often quite expensive as well. So UNEP has been embarking on a global environmental data strategy for the past few years that we have just finished, and we'll start the implementation in January. And many of you have been involved in that. So thank you very much for your insights. And it was really centered around these pillars. So how do we make environmental data more interoperable, higher quality, more accessible? And how do we build the capacity, not only the technical capacity of people to generate and analyze the data, but also on the policymaker side to be able to use it for policy decisions. Next slide, please. So one of the ways in which we're putting the Global Environmental Data Strategy, or GEDS as we shorten it, into action is through the World Environment Situation Room, or WESR. We like our acronyms, sorry. But the World Environment Situation Room is something that UNEP has been building for quite a long time. And we're now relaunching it into a platform for environmental data. So not just circularity, but all environmental domains, and insights powered by AI, but powered by different types of data analysis. Next slide, please. So I didn't want to do a live demo because we never know about internet connectivity and these things. So I just put a number of screenshots for you here to show you what it looks like. But the good news is it's live actually in the UN compound. So you can go anytime during this week, you'll find it. We have a physical space next to UNON lobby, and you'll be able to experiment with all these tools yourself. But here's what it looks like. And this is a pilot, obviously, because we're still kind of playing around with different concepts. But what we're launching this week are the three pillars on the left, namely applications, the data catalog, and data analysis tools. And I'll just walk you very quickly through what they do. Next slide, please. So the applications part is where you build persistent applications that live on the World Environment Situation Room and are available for policymakers, for scientists, for the general public, for any user who would like to benefit from them. And the first one we built together with my colleague here, Andrea, our chief scientist, and her office, which is a policy tracker. And we've started with air pollution, but the idea is to expand it to other domains. And I can imagine that circularity would be one of the highest priorities on the list. If we go to the next slide, I can show you what that looks like for air pollution. So you can look at different air quality policy indicators and narrow them down by the different pollutants, see trends over time. And then on the next slide, you can dive into country pages and see, for example, what air pollution policies Kenya has implemented. You can even compare them to neighboring countries or any other countries in terms of policy implementation. Like I said, this is for air pollution, but I think there's a lot of space to do something similar for circularity. Next slide, please. This is the data catalog, and I've chosen specifically the SCP HAT database here. Many of you may be familiar with the SCP HAT platform for sustainable consumption and production data. Of course, my colleague here and Adriana as well are very familiar with this. So again, we federated a number of data sets from different sources, and you can access them all in the WESR data catalog. So the idea here is not for UNEP to generate or even host every data set on the planet. The idea is to federate. So to take data from where it's collected and where it's hosted and have it all accessible in the same place. And then you can either download it, you can definitely see the metadata. And then if we go to the next slide, this is my favorite part of WESR, what I like to call the DIY section, the do-it-yourself, which is basically a set of data analysis tools where you can pull data out of the data catalog and analyze them yourself. So this is if you need something quick for a quick presentation, for a quick kind of decision or anything like that, you can go into that and you can search through the entire data catalog. In this case, we have maps, but we'll also soon have geospatial maps. So this is not included now, but we'll also have charts, and we'll have AI capabilities that allow you to give a natural language query. So show me the latest policies on circularity in Eastern Africa over the last 5 years, or something like that. And then I want that plotted on a map, but I also want a summary report that I can immediately use. And of course, AI can do that now. So the good thing about this is that you can choose what you analyze and what you visualize. So if you want to combine different data sets, if you want to correlate, and sorry, I keep butchering science, Andrea, by inventing examples, but if you want to overlay circularity data with, I don't know, e-waste data, or you were talking about metals and their recyclability earlier, and rare earths, which actually go into electronics production and AI data centers. So if you want to overlay those data sets on top of each other, you can see that and you can start building kind of correlations and inferring cause and effect relationships where they exist. So here you can drill down on every indicator in every data set that we have. And of course, this is limited by the size of the data catalog, but we're planning more and more integrations very soon. Next slide, please. And this is the other thing that we're launching this week. This is Environment GPT, also a collaboration with the Office of Science. And this is supposed to answer questions on the environment, many different domains. And the good thing is, so it is built on GPT, hence Environment GPT, but it is augmented with UNEP approved science. So reports that UNEP has generated or approved. And so it doesn't hallucinate. It doesn't go to the internet and just fetch any random information. It gives you concise responses with references to the sources where they came from. And of course, there are a number of filters here. So if we go to the next slides, you can see a couple of examples. So this is one on circular economy, for example, even though we don't actually have specific sources on circular economy yet, but it was able to pull from sources that we do have. So you can see the different references, you can see the confidence that it shows, and you can see its environmental impact. Of course, this is dependent on data that is available, which is not much, but at least it gives you an indication of how environmentally sustainable that particular query was. And then on the left, you can look at the different filters. You can filter or narrow down by report type. So GEO, for example, the Global Environmental Outlook is in there. You can narrow down by audience and change the tone of the response based on the audience. So in this case, we have policymakers, but if you go to the next one, it's a slightly different question, but also you can see the different format and the different level of detail of the answer. So for the general public, it gives very short, punchy bullet point answers. What can I do? You can do 1, 2, 3, 4. For policymakers, it's more involved. It's more linked to policy action as well. So this is Environment GPT that will, of course, continuing to build and expand to other environmental domains. And you can also see it in the weather location that I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. So how can you get involved? Like I said, you can come visit us at the physical weather space during UNEA. And after UNEA, actually, it will always be there. We're having daily demos every day at noon, where we walk you through all the different tools, but you can also drop by anytime. If you have partners, if you have stakeholders that you'd like to discuss this with, please feel free to bring them. And then finally, next slide, please. Beyond UNEA, what can you do? You can work with us to include more data sets, to recommend more data sets for inclusion in weather. You can think together with us on how to include some of the external platforms that exist into weather so that we have that broad base that allows us to build those different use cases and more complex analyses. And you can, of course, join the trainings that we're going to start from the new year. And with that, thank you very much, Roland. Back to you.
Thank you, Sally. That was very informative session on the data collection repository that we have at UNEP. And navigating through these data sources is of pivotal importance for going forward on any policy descriptions. Now we turn to looking into ISO certification as a standardization and how we can actually, it maybe help with private sector and others. So the floor is yours, please.
Good afternoon, friends and colleagues. I feel like I'm in a room of very like-minded people. Everything that we've spoken about this afternoon very much resonates with us in our system. And I want to talk a little bit this afternoon about the role of data, firstly in the international standard setting system that I'm a part of as the Australian member. And then I want to talk about some work that we're doing to try and avoid what we see as duplication of effort, but duplication of effort that comes from a very good place. So on the next slide, I just want to talk a little bit about how we use environmental data in our work. A little bit of audience participation first. Put your hand up if you've heard the term bromoform. Asparagopsis. No, okay. So one of the most recent standards that we've published is for a type of seaweed, a sustainable seaweed that if fed to ruminant animals reduces methane emissions from those animals by 30%. It's quite remarkable. And it's all based on ISO standards that allow us to produce the right substance, to get the right substance in the feedlots, and then to give it to the animals, and then to be able to track how the methane emissions are reducing in our environment. We've done a lot of work in microplastics, a huge amount of work in different types of plastics and making plastic pipes more sustainable. Carbon capture and storage, again, is a very big area of focus, and products like concrete and cement, making much more sustainable concrete and cement. I can say they're more sustainable, but unless we have the data to prove it, it's a puff statement at the very best. So within our system, first of all, I wanted to make the point that every day our technical committees are doing a lot of work to make sure that we have one standard for the world that does the work that we need it to do. And we're doing a lot of work to make sure that those standards are more sustainable. So if we go to the next slide, please. I want to give two real world examples of how this data is used. There's a new one that sort of popped up overnight. So wildfires or bushfires, as we know them in Australia, are a very big deal. They're not going away. And there's a lot of data that's used to make sure that the structures that we build, that the communities that we settle actually are able to survive in the places in which we put them. I was going to use a US example. I'll use a more recent one from Australia. We had some fires over the last 2 days. We spent a lot of time in Australia making sure that we have a bushfire construction standard that is fit for purpose. I was on a plane when the fires started, and I'm ordinarily our spokesperson who gets up and talks about how the houses performed through the fire. When I got off the plane last night, the first story in the Sydney Morning Herald was a guy who said that he had built his house to the most recent Australian standard, and it was the only one that survived in a village. Now, we don't pull these standards out of the air. We get a lot of experts around with data to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to protect us from these things. And then again, in terms of air pollution, so there's a huge amount of work that goes on in all sorts of product standards to reduce the emissions that we have, to track how different cities and areas are polluted, and to sort of put the two together to be able to have in Jakarta, I was in Jakarta a few weeks ago, they've got a live tracker now that tells you if it's safe to go for a run or not in the morning. And in the US as well, they're doing a lot of work with that data. But there's so much more that we can do. There is so much more that we can do, particularly within our system of allowing people to understand what it is that we do and not just think of us as sort of really technical, boring standards nerds. On the next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Australian context. So we have some very bold ambitions in Australia with our government. And one of the things that we're doing is actually setting benchmarks so that we can then measure from that, and doing that within the standards and technical regulation layer. Because government has obviously a role in that layer of being able to move regulations. So we're doing a lot there, and that relies on us being able to measure from the standards that we have, how we're going. Do we need to move something more? If we move this down, what is the economic impact? What's going to happen to our small and micro businesses in Australia? It's a whole bunch of things that we're doing. So on the next slide, we thought, how could we apply this type of thinking at a global scale? So how could we take the thinking that we were doing in Australia and working with ISO, map it together and do it in a way where policymakers can understand the work that we do and how they might be able to better leverage that work to achieve their own outcomes. I was at COP just a few weeks ago. And one of the things that really irritates me at COP is that there is a new standard for everything all of the time. And you'll talk to people, and they love standards at COP, but you'll talk about somebody solving a sustainability problem, not even in a vertical, in a subset of a vertical, and then their colleague is solving it next door in another subset of the vertical. And by the end of the day, you've got 55 new standards, and then you've got industry saying, well, how are we supposed to respond to this when everything is slightly different? So again, one of the drivers for this work of ours is to make it much easier for people to see into our system and to understand where they might be able to leverage it. So on the next slide, I know it's the next slide where I have a demo that probably won't work. This is the methodology that we had. So we looked at about 50 different technical committees. Our technical committees are very, very technical, as you'd expect them to be. But when you pull out of it to sort of get to that 38,000 foot level, it can be quite hard for them to engage in dialogue about a system shift. So we thought, well, if we work with about 48 committees, 1,100 standards, and 800 other reference standards, what might we be able to see when we map this? So on the next slide, please, you should be able to click the little, yeah, here. So on the ISO website now, we've mapped the standards, and you can go in and look in a first phase at the different standards that apply to different systems or different policy levers, so that if you are working on a policy in biodiversity or natural hazards or plastics is another one, an example that we use all the time, or water quality, you can go in and see, first of all, the existing catalogue of work that exists. You can see what work is underway. The best time to seek to change a standard or to influence it is when it's under development. And even more importantly, in the work that we're doing at the moment, a little bit like the ChatGPT example that you just gave, how you might be able to ask questions in natural language and then get a natural language answer to make our system much more easy for people to use. I think that's going to go around again. I'm not a standards man, I've got to tell you. I've been working in standards for almost 20 years. And even on the inside, sometimes I find it very hard to navigate the system. And the power of the technology that we have available to us now is really going to help us to sort of lift up above the detail and to start to change some things. So if we could stop the demo, please. Three things. So on the ISO website are two databases, one for critical minerals and rare earths, and a second now for the broader sustainability data. We published a research report. As a first effort, in the multilateral system, we were keen not to offend anybody. So we only used their own standards. We think we're going to expand that to a much broader set. And we think there's a really strong opportunity for us to connect into the global environmental data work, because there's so much good work that exists in our system and in others, and we just need to be able to leverage it better. And we think that by allowing its discoverability, by allowing for people who aren't deep subject matter experts in the particular domains and lifting it up, we're going to get more traction. And we're working with colleagues in a range of other sectors. I have 3 points on my last slide before I finish, if I can. So I think reflecting on our own system, we don't make it easy for people to work with us or to understand us. We talk in a weird language of codes and numbers and things. And insiders understand that language, but people on the outside don't. So the first thing that we need to do is to be able to communicate more with people outside of our own context. And we need to make it easier for policymakers to connect with us. And that's really what this effort is about. It's about allowing for our standards to be discovered and discoverable by people who might be able to use them, to avoid that scenario that I spoke about at COP, where every year you turn up and there's 15 new groups doing the same thing with the best of intentions, but in silos. And through the week, if you do have a chance to go and have a look at our tool, would love an opportunity to chat about what else we might be able to do that could help you in your efforts and really connect the ISO standards into your systems. So appreciate the opportunity this afternoon. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. That was very insightful. Now we turn into Ms. Parker about South Africa experience in life cycle from to inform us about national policy in directing investments to reduce waste and promote resource efficiency. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm going to share, mention the experiences of South Africa in embedding life cycle approaches into its EPR legislation. Next slide, please. So just by way of background and introduction, South Africa has, in its environmental management waste act of 2009 defined a life cycle approach as in the context for South Africa, which is defined as a life cycle assessment means a process where the potential environmental effects or impacts of a product or service throughout the life cycle of that product is being evaluated. So we take that as the principle with which we work from. Section 18 of that same act provides for EPR regulations and implementation. So the implementation of EPR is also a way for South Africa to transition to a more circular economy and towards the implementation of the strategy and initiatives that were introduced by the government. Okay. So I'm not going to go too much into what EPR is. I think most of the colleagues here are fully aware of it. But just to say that South Africa gazetted in 2020 EPR regulations and finally published them in 2021, which requires producers, brand owners, and importers of identified products to undertake life cycle assessment studies focusing on material minimization, product design, in order to facilitate reuse, recycling, and recovery, as well as reduction of the environmental toxicity of waste streams. And these were done in key sectors such as packaging, et cetera, where the EPR regulations were introduced. So what are the LCA considerations for South Africa? Limited LCA experiences and capability, and a lack of guidance on how LCA should be conducted in order to meet various requirements. So that is a concern. The two main standards, which were mentioned before, the ISO standards and a range of additional possible applicable standards for different purposes, make it a bit difficult and challenging to navigate the LCA landscape for those that need to undertake those kind of assessments. Whilst LCA is a standard methodology regulated by the ICO standards, however, provide only a general framework which opens room to interpretation, methodological issues. Every country implements them differently, and a lack of consistency in validating the results of these assessments. The aim of the guideline project is to provide guidance on how to conduct LCA studies in accordance with both the regulations and export market requirements, providing a standardized set of recommendations regarding the various methodological choices that need to be made when conducting such a study. So the South African experience of using LCA in the context of EPR law and regulations is that measures need to be implemented by the producers. We need to conduct the life cycle assessment in relation to the identified products and standards within 5 years of the EPR scheme. Through the life cycle assessment as a minimum focus on the following. As I indicated, minimization of materials used in the identified product, design of the product to facilitate the 3 R's, reuse, recycle, and recovery, while not compromising the functionality of the product, and the reduction of environmental toxicity of the resulting post-consumer waste streams. These guidelines are currently being tested with the PROs, or the Producer Responsibility Organization Research Institution, through outreach and education activities on the tools and evaluations that are being undertaken. To make reporting on LCA a requirement and to provide systems for reporting is something that we've taken on board as a lesson as South Africa. There's a need to provide flexibility on the life cycle assessment and in order to avoid duplication, but conducted once over a 5-year period. The issue of not reinventing the wheel, as producers may have more capacity than the PROs to conduct such assessments. The process is participatory from the development of the regulations. Compliance to the requirements is mandatory as it is embedded in law. And then we also partner with research organizations such as our CSIR in South Africa, which is the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, who help with such studies. So coming from that, what are some of the recommendations that we could take forward? Certainly furthering international cooperation, example through the global LCA platform, could make efforts more effective and impactful. International partnerships with organizations such as UNEP can go a long way in assisting a transition to a circular economy that includes life cycle assessments. Domestic partnerships with research organizations and institutions of higher learning on research and development and innovation. Those partnerships are crucial in terms of providing the research necessary to conduct those life cycle assessments. I think with that, I've come to the conclusion of my presentation, and those are the key considerations that South Africa has taken into consideration for the life cycle assessments. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Unfortunately, there is no time for Q&A, or even though I would have loved to engage you. Just let me summarize before we ask the second part of the panelists. Sally provided with database, gadgets, the tools through Weather. Please visit the platform in Yunnan. Adam presented us with the importance of data standardizations and with the economic benefits that may come out of it. And Ms. Parker provide us with the fact that life cycle assessment actually works. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking them for this learning experience. Thank you.
Great. We will make space at the end to listen from you, but we are moving now to panel 3. And I'm glad that already Rula, with the great panelists we have, started to move from science to action. But this panel is about practice and experience fueling innovation and scaling up solutions. Andrea at the beginning mentioned that innovation is there. There are very good examples working great, but still in a small scale. But I'm very happy to say that we have another set of excellent panelists and practitioners that will answer that question. How can we scale up action for circular economy? So with this, let me please invite Margaret Camus, who is a climate change and green growth expert from the African Development Bank. And not only that, she's a great and African Circular Economy Alliance. So please join us. Mr. Daniel Grajales, who is the Global Policy Manager of the International Chamber of Commerce. I'm very glad that you are here with us. Maybe we can. And Mr. Titus Karanja, Chief Executive Officer from FinTech Frontiers Ltd. I'm very happy that I have worked almost with all of you in advancing circular economy. Do you want to join us here? So just you can sit here. I will leave Rula sitting here with us, and let me start with Margaret. And Margaret, as we said, what we really want to discuss here is to learn more from all of you on how you are practically scaling up the circular economy. Also to share with the audience how networks are important in bringing those solutions, and we look at, well, financial mechanisms. This panel will bring also more the perspective of the finance, the private sector, SMEs, not to forget, and the finance. So with this, Margaret, what I would like to hear is, can you share with us the experience of the African Circular Economy Alliance and how it has really helped in the scaling of the uptake of circularity?
Thank you very much, Adriana. And it's a pleasure to be here and to see so many familiar faces in the room. So as introduced, my name is Margaret Kamau, and I sit at the Secretariat of the African Circular Economy Alliance. And this is hosted at the African Development Bank. It is an alliance of African member countries, and our founding member countries were Nigeria, Rwanda, and South Africa. We've now expanded to about 22 African countries and counting. We do also have strategic partnerships. We have a number of about 15 plus, almost 18 strategic partners, including UNEP, who we have worked well with. And the idea is that ASEA as an alliance is a platform to support governments and to give them the capacity and enable them to uptake circular economy action. As we know, circular economy is, while it has existed, its implementation in Africa, I would say, is more recent, and especially within the language that we use nowadays. So we have supported countries to develop circular economy roadmaps. We started first with 4 countries, and we are about to roll out a new phase in 2026, targeting about another 5 countries. And the idea is that the roadmap is a priority. So it's a prioritized list of circular economy initiatives specific to that country. The process of developing the roadmap would include engaging stakeholders, looking as well at the development trajectory of the country, and from that process, identifying what the key priorities are, and then that goes into the roadmap. And eventually, the idea is that that roadmap can be financed. So whether it's financed through the national budgets or through donor-funded support, that is, the idea is that it leads to clear circular economy action. I think that summarizes what we're doing as a CIEP. Maybe I'll talk a bit more about it.
Yeah, maybe a few words how you are bringing knowledge into action and supporting the implementation.
Sure, thank you. I had a few slides. I don't know if they could help, but so when ASEA was founded, we undertook a research paper known as the 5 Big Bets for Africa. And this aimed to identify what the key investable or priority areas for circular economy in Africa could be. And that has then founded the work of the Alliance since then. So once the 5 Big Bets were identified, we formed working groups, which are chaired by a respective country. So the country selection is based on where that priority lies. You know, we have, for example, textiles. Cote d'Ivoire showed an interest in that. So they are championing that working group. But the idea is that within those working groups, there's now an opportunity to determine how best can we share the information that is available, how best can we share pilot examples from pilot case studies, how best can we share research and knowledge that is generated within that working group. So, let's see. But that is one area in which we're enabling this knowledge sharing, using the strength of the Alliance, the platform as is. The other area I'd like to highlight is, of course, the role of our strategic partners. And because many of them are present in the room, you know, UNEP, UNDP, we've really worked well to leverage some of their tools and some of the research papers that they have developed. I was quite happy to hear about the environment GPT. I think that one will be very useful for our work. We don't have to go to ChatGPT anymore. We can just go directly to something that is tailored for our work. But I think that's an area to explore. With regards to standards, I think we were pointed out as, you know, when you go to COP or these meetings, there's always a new standard. And I think as a CIEP, we are guilty of preparing a new standard for harmonized recycled PET. So that is another area of potential engagement. But all this to say that I would like to highlight the strength of partnerships. You know, we cannot all be good in everything. So we do realize that some partners could be stronger in, for example, financing circularity. So UNEP FI and the report that they have done on that has been quite useful. Other partners could be better at rolling out EPR schemes. The ITU is working in Rwanda to support a scheme for take back of electronics. So as the Alliance, we do recognize that these partnerships are crucial, and we try to bring that knowledge and share it within our Alliance. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Margaret. And we have the screen here, and you can see and learn more about the 5 big bets. And being in Africa is fantastic to have the 5 big. So let me now move to Daniel. And Daniel, we want to hear from you how the International Chamber of Commerce is bringing the private sector based on knowledge and on the evidence that you have there to uptake action for circularity.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to this event. I am with the Global Policy Department of the International Chamber of Commerce. The International Chamber of Commerce, we are the largest business association in the world. And as such, we have kind of a dual role. On one hand, we have this enormous network of businesses coming from all geographical regions, and we have a large amount of SMEs in our membership. On the other hand, we are also making the connection between the business community and the discussions that are taking places, for example, at UNEP, like the highest levels of policy making in the world. Therefore, we think that making this connection is a responsibility for our network. And what we see in practice is that the businesses, and especially the SMEs, they learn by doing. Simply putting the policies and the high-level frameworks out there is not enough, especially for the SME. They learn by redesigning the products, by changing their supply chains, by incorporating the circular economy into their relationships to their clients. This practical connection is something that is learned through information sharing, through finding where success can be achieved, but also very importantly, where failure also happens. Because in a transition to a circular economy, businesses will occasionally also run into failure, and being able to share what worked and what did not work is essential. And what we see on the ground is that often sharing information about what didn't work is actually more difficult. The businesses need to feel that they have the trust and that they are in spaces where there's a constructive dialogue. At the International Chamber of Commerce, there are three specific ways in which we approach this challenge. The first one is creating platforms. Specifically, we have the Global Material Data Hub, which we are co-creating with Systemic. It's an important project that we hope to see get implemented very soon. And it's about incorporating all of the information and making it available to the business community. We also do it to create spaces for businesses to discuss, as I mentioned, in a constructive, business-friendly environment, and especially with a focus on what are the economics behind the transition to the circular economy. For SMEs in particular, they are actors that are capable of incredible creativity, but they are also economically fragile. They need to be able to understand that the economics behind transition will work, to be convinced of the business case for it. And we think that these kind of spaces are very important to achieve that. And finally, we do this through connecting these practical experiences to our participation in policy forums. Every time we participate in an international conference, like UNEP7, like COP30, we bring this practical experience to the ground. And the idea is for the practical experiences, the successes and the failures of the business community to also inform what is happening at UNEP, at COP30, at all of these policymaking forums. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel, and thanks for highlighting the role of SMEs, the differences, and also the need to build the business case. I'm so happy it flows very well. I'm so happy to have Titus here, Titus Carranjo, as I say, Chief Executive Officer of Vintage Frontiers, and we work with him in one very interesting project in Kenya. So I want to ask to you, so how do we really address this financial need for financial mechanisms first for circularity, but second, financial mechanisms that really reach SMEs, no? Because sometimes for them it's more difficult. So if you can, I know you have very interesting examples to share there.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrea, and thanks everyone. It's a great honor to be here. I come from a private sector perspective, financial services and business advisory work with a lot of SMEs, Daniel. And when UNEP set up a project where we were going to pilot, if you pair scientists with a financial person, can you actually make money move? And I was really happy that you got the idea. Thank you very much. And secondly, that it actually worked really well for us, that as a finance person, I did not have any background whatsoever on the science. And earlier on, when I had the chief scientist saying that you need the scientific feasibility to be proven, what we were then trying to do was follow that up with commercial viability behind those scientific numbers. And the experience was that we got a large value chain here, SME by international standard, but pretty big for Kenya, to actually adopt circular production opportunities, to fund them using their own money, and then to go and approach financial institutions, and one of whom then extended financing for this to be done. And essentially what then that did was to prove that circularity is not only just good for the environment, but it's actually good business. Subsequently, Andrea moved on to another project on the cleanup of Nairobi rivers, waste to rivers. And we have actually used the same model, borrowed from him, to then get manufacturers in the Nairobi River Basin to exactly same approach, where scientists do the evaluation, I follow behind them, modeling the financial side and actually getting money to move. And so coming to your question about what do I think can happen on this is that
there are really three things we have to do here. We have to convince the value chain owners to actually trust somebody to look at their business and tell them where the opportunities lie. That requires a lot of trust, and therefore that requires network with who they trust. The second thing we need to do is make those scientific numbers, scientific facts become business numbers. And then lastly, once that is done, we need to then get the appropriate finance to work behind it. And you can imagine how much network of different players with different perspectives that takes. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for bringing this good example. And actually, the guilty one for that project is David Rubia. I don't see him.
The man behind this.
He's
Yes.
there. So just I want to acknowledge that. And I'm glad you brought together basically what we've been discussing this afternoon. No? We need the science there, the multi-stakeholder, the trust, and then of course the finance. I had a second round of questions, but I have an idea, Rula. We will open the floor. We would like to hear from you. So rather than me asking, we want to take a few questions from the floor. It can be to our three panelists here or also previous speakers. And I see the hand there. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Luca Kapchanga. I represent an organization known as Emonyo International. I'm from Kenya. I have a sort of like 2 questions or 3. When Malitu representing the youth, he spoke of, okay, the question direct is this: how is it possible to say that youth between the ages of 17 and 18 are aware of the circular economy in regards to the unreliable internet access across the terrain of different regions of this country, in addition to an economic hardship they are going through? I hope he may explain, because the way he spoke, he indicated that the Kenyan youth understand the circular economy. My 2 questions go to, was it this a UNEP guy? As a country, is there facilitated impacts and outcomes of circular economy in Kenya? Has Kenya the capacity to document progress monitoring reports across the economy, which are transparent, credible, and effective? Thanks.
Any other question from the floor?
Thank you so much. I'm Jacob Mugumi. I work for an NGO called Young Professionals for Development. I have a question to the Global Policy Manager, International Chamber of Commerce. How do you make sure that you balance between private sector interest and global human interest in environmental development? Thank you.
And the last one, and then.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Samuel. Yeah, that's not sustainable for the environment. Yes, my name is Samuel Jose. I was working previously also with the Ministry of National Development Planning Indonesia. My question is to the African Development Bank representative, AFDB. So when I was working with the World Bank loan project in Indonesia, we also try to replicate, but sometimes we face difficulty of replicating those pilot projects, especially when coordinating with the regional governments. And we also face several challenges where sometimes the strict World Bank environmental and social safeguard management framework cannot be applied in that local context, in the local community. So is there any particular ways to tackle this in order for us to promote, a replicable pilot projects focusing on implementing the data that we are researching to the ground in achieving circular economy? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Titus, you want to start, and then I move to Daniel and Mark.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll tackle the question of whether we have data on circularity. I would say that the database is now beginning to build up because of the kind of pilots that I've talked about here. But just for your comfort, to let you know the kind of numbers that are coming out of it. On one of the projects, we found that the smaller circularity projects within the value chain, it was a dairy value chain. The best one had a payback period of 18 months, and that got the value chain owner to just invest in it themselves. We then had others like some energy interventions and some water reuse interventions, which had a return on investment of 27% on a payback period of 36 months. And that really is attractive to any business person, so they did it. Of course, what we need to do is build this up into a national level database, because that's one value chain. On the effluent treatment plants that I'm saying we are working on for the Nairobi River cleanup, the one that has actually gone through end to end has testable data now for about 13 months. And it has shown that the payback period based on water reuse, because they are recycling the entire water that they were losing as effluent. I think it was Charles who said you need to look at it. This is not waste anymore. It's now not wastewater. It's actually reusable water. And their payback period based on the tariff rate for Nairobi water has come to 30 to 36 months. So that's just some individual statistics. I wish we can get to a level where we collect it at national level. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. And I'll take the second question, which I think was about data and how it's incorporated into the transition to a circular economy for the private sector. At the International Chamber of Commerce, what we see is that many businesses understand quite well the need for a transition to a circular economy. The real question that we see, especially when we engage with SMEs, is how to do it. What is the business case? What is the practical application of this transition? We are a Chamber of Commerce, and as such, we represent the business community, and we also get our mandate from the business community. What we see is not only enormous interest on this, and this is what leads us to, for example, partner with SASH for hosting dialogues with SMEs at COP30, the launch of the ICC Agri-Food Hub, our several initiatives on circular economy, and of course, our very presence in this kind of fora is a direct consequence of the mandates of the business community that we represent. For that reason, and I mentioned it before, we think that there is not really such a extraordinary need of convincing the business community of the infrastructure economy. Is more the implementation of it, the focus at the moment. As I mentioned, what we see on the ground, and especially from SMEs, is a keen interest in engaging in this and seeing how this will perform on the ground. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Basically showing why the business case, what is the motivation, incentive, and the help. Margaret, Martin.
Thank you. So on the question, I understood it to be that whether there's any conflict between implementing circular economy initiatives and national or the bank-wide environmental social safeguard system. Is that correct? So in our case, as the bank, we do have an integrated social safeguards system where we look at certain environmental and social performance standards. To date, we have not had an incidence of conflict. When we invest in a project in a country, we rely on the national environmental standards. And often we find that any initiative that has included an element of circular economy is going ahead of what is already there in the national policy framework. So for example, a recent project that we're looking at in Eritrea is looking at rolling out solar PV and battery. But currently, the country does not have the necessary infrastructure for recycling or repurposing of that equipment. So through the development of a hazardous waste management plan, there's now an idea to look at, can a recycling facility be set up? But there still would need to be, some gap filling on the policy and legislative framework, and then developing the standards for that country So this is to say that often some of these initiatives go ahead of what is already in the country. And within our investment projects, we'll find that the first component will often be, the implementation of the activity, but the second component will always look at the policy and legislative framework. So we'll always look at, is there a need to develop in the enabling environment? Is there a need to train and build the capacity of the relevant ministry? So we think about that in our investment projects, but to date, we've not had any incidences of conflict. If I may, I'd just like to speak to the question about Kenyan youth, whether they know about circular economy. And I think that's a very good question. And I would say not just Kenyan youth, but youth in Africa globally, actually. But I think often the challenge is the language that we use. We sit here and talk about circular economy and we all understand what it is. But someone out there, whether young or old, could be implementing an element of circular economy, but using a different language for it. And I think that comes back to, I think one of the speakers in the first panel who talked about the language used is very important. When you target a policymaker versus a consumer versus a financier, the way in which you speak about the initiative has to differ. So I would say that I believe the Kenyan youth are aware of circular economy. They may be doing it in a different way and speaking about it in a different way. So maybe there is need to try to adopt these, maybe have a dictionary of circular economy and have examples of how this is referred to in different countries and different contexts. And maybe that can help in harmonizing this language aspect. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret, and thanks for addressing that question on youth, and fully agree. And I'm glad Andrea is here, but also UNEP, we want to bring traditional knowledge, indigenous people's knowledge. So it's not only about the science, but it's also the knowledge that is in the communities. And I think that's got very much linked to what you are saying, And also the other thing is translating the knowledge into the different contexts. So with this, we need to close this panel. The cocktail is waiting and we still have one more interesting panel. But what I really want to thank you all because you are bringing here, I think the key message here is to bring the message that it's very important to engage private sector, that we need to look at financial mechanism. I love what you say is important first business case, building trust. And then of course, how it will be following with the finance, the importance of not only the private sector, but also looking at the different challenges of SMEs, how to do it. And then Margaret also how the alliance, the African Development Bank is supporting the African Alliance, is scaling up defining key value chains or key sectors, and then how it's gonna be translated into national legislation plans, policies. So with this, join me to give a round of applause to our panelists. And I give over the floor to my colleague, Ruby.
Well, it looks like this is the last session and standing between you and the cocktail hour. So anyway, now as we're moving from practice to the how, scalability, knowledge transfer, replicating the scale, how do actually we do that? And I'm very fortunate today to actually have somebody talk to us about partnerships because we can't do it alone. It's through partnership. So it is leveraging the partnership for collective impacts. And so our panelist today is, the first one is Ms. Fabian Pierre. She is the head of the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership, and she is dialing remotely. Probably. Do we have the next panelist? Okay. And the second panelist is Dr. Peter Deary. He is the Director of Environment Ministry and Science and Technology in Ghana for Waste Management Policy Support System. Can I ask Dr. Peter to come forward, please? And our third speaker for today, or panelist, I should say, Mr. Jean-Marie Lapron. He is the head officer and national coordinator of the CCPM in the DRC. Please welcome. Please help me welcome our guests online and in the room. Thank you. So this is an interactive session, and I think we're going to follow the same model as we did with our last session. This is to open door for dialogue thereafter, and it is productive. So I'm going to ask the panelists, and is Fabian on? No? Okay, so.
I am connected. I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, now we can. Thank you, Fabian. So I'm going to ask first the panelists in the room to one question, and then we're going to turn the audience. So prepare your questions, please. How can strategic partnerships amplify impacts through specific initiatives? And what immediate commitments can participants make to institutionalize knowledge sharing and practice? I'm open for any of you taking the floor.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And talking about partnerships and knowledge sharing, we want to situate the case of Ghana based on the waste management support system, which we are working with the UN Office for Sustainable Development. And I want to use the opportunity to also thank them for extending this program to Ghana and making us part of this global initiative, which is trying to standardize waste management data across board, and also to support countries to be able to have a more comprehensive and integrated data system to inform decision-making. Let me start by saying that this is very important for Ghana because the waste management sector is one of the most important sectors for us, because we believe that in addressing issues in the waste management sector, you are able to also contribute a lot to meeting the Sustainable Development Goals in about 12 out of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals I would speak about. One of the major issues has been the fragmented nature of data in our country, and the fact that waste management data sits in different institutions in Ghana. For example, if you want e-waste data, you have to go to the Environmental Protection Agency. If you want municipal solid waste, you have to go to the Ministry of Local Government. If you want plastics data, you have to come to the Ministry of Environment. If you want agricultural residue or agricultural waste, you have to go to the Ministry of Agriculture, and so on and so forth. So very fragmented, sitting in different institutions with a lack of coordination. And therefore, since we do not have that accurate data, decision-making becomes a little challenging. For example, we are not able to know where the technical gaps are really present. We are not able to know where we need to actually channel our resources, because we are not able to identify where the resource gap is. We are not able to also identify which players are in the system that we need to focus on and support, and so on and so forth. So a lot of decision-making gaps. And this initiative that we are doing with the United Nations Office for Sustainable Development is helping to bridge that gap, because it's helping to bring different stakeholders, both from the public and the private sector, around the table and onto a single platform where we are able to contribute data from the different areas that these stakeholders operate. For example, we have stakeholders from the different ministries, departments, and agencies coming on board. We have stakeholders from the private sector. We have stakeholders from financing institutions, the banks, and so on, who are coming around this platform to provide needed data. The system is such that we're using a two approach model to be able to to support decision making. The first has to do with the survey section, which has to do with the collection of the data from the different stakeholders and trying to integrate that and make sure that you synchronize that. And then the second part, which has to do with the reporting, how you analyze this data to make meaningful information for decision making. We are fortunate to have been selected by the United Nations Office for Sustainable Development as the West African Hub. And so it means that what we are going to be doing in Ghana will also extend to the region, the West African region. And we want to use the opportunity to thank them for selecting us. We've had a first round of stakeholder engagement where we launched the program, explaining the program to them to appreciate what it is and how they are going to be able to contribute to making sure that this happens. We are still at the very initial stage of the partnership. We haven't done much. The launch was done just in August this year. But as we move forward, we hope to roll it out fully and make sure that we are able to create that system that will collect a comprehensive and more integrated data for waste management in Ghana and beyond.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, please can you tell us about your experience with partnership in bridging the data gap into policy?
Thank you for the opportunity to give me to be part of this panel. Sorry for my poor English, but I will try. Talking about partnership and digital solution, importantly, building collective intelligence necessitates deliberate effort and commitments that strategically align the realization of the sustainable goals. The goal number 9 on industry, innovation, and infrastructure. The goal 13 on climate action. And the goal 17 on strategic partnership. And to do it, as you know, digital solutions are essential for advancement of different sectors, especially on environmental diplomacy. Technology globally needs to be accessible to and inclusive for all to ensure and to ensure it and eliminate all barriers and it enhances efficiency in ecosystem conservation. Within the changing environment technology, for example, big data, internet and things, artificial intelligence, ought to complement human capacity and capability to advance innovation. I think to complete my colleague regarding data, that's the important things, the data and the level of knowledge of people. To add to this, the access to some platform and to this technology. It's important to see each countries, each people, what kind of level, in what level of technology they are, to help them to accede to this technology. That's what I can say now briefly.
Thank you. And you added a new ounce to the discussion in terms of digital solutions, and in addition to partnerships. And with this, I'm going to turn to Ms. Fabian. Ms. Fabian?
I'm connected if you can hear me.
We can. So we are
Excellent.
examining several issues, and we now come to you in looking at data, partnerships, solution. We examined standardization. We looked at, and maybe through platforms, maybe this is something that you want to take us through, please.
Thank you very much, Rula, and thank you for such an interesting discussion today. If I can briefly talk about what we are doing with the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership, GGKP, that is a global initiative led by UNEP, UNIDO, the World Bank, the OECD, and GGGI, to facilitate the exchange, the promotion, the application of green and circular economy knowledge across regions and value chains. So a lot of what has been discussed today is really at the core of our mission and the work that we are doing with a growing community of over 90 knowledge partners and a broad network of stakeholders. And in fact, our network and the knowledge partnerships that we are developing are our main asset. And they are what we need to break those knowledge silos and to create a coalition that works together to overcome information overload, fragmentation, and build the know-how for circular economy. And all of those challenges were discussed today. We have a series, for instance, of dedicated knowledge platforms that are soon going to be powered by a smart federated search engine that virtually connects multiple platforms and knowledge sources. So it's really about connecting knowledge, connecting communities, and building that common knowledge capital that we need to scale up circular economy. At the moment, in this federated search engine that is powered by AI, we have over 200,000 knowledge resources available. And the objective here is precisely to help stakeholders navigate those resources and identify specific insights that are adapted to their needs and context. And that was said also the importance of translating this knowledge into something that makes sense for people, whether they are in the policy community, in the industry, in the finance community, or in the technical assistance community. Today, we have 3 platforms, one for policy, industry, and finance, and we are collaborating with other UN agencies and partners to develop specific tools such as the WMPSS that Dr. Derry just mentioned. So we heard today that science and data inform strategies and policies, but also that experience-based knowledge is essential to equip real economy actors for implementation. So that's our objective in GGKP, so is really to focus on knowledge from experience and for action. I also heard Daniel say that it's important to also learn from what did not work, and that's also indeed very, very important. The need, what we are working on at the moment is also to diversify the knowledge sources that we are bringing together so that we can capture those experiences and those best practices that are coming from all sectors, including, for instance, SMEs or local communities from all regions. And last thing that I wanted to say is that alongside digital platforms, the digital space, and all the opportunities that digital solutions are offering today, we need to really work on engagement opportunities that enhance knowledge flows. Those are essential also to translate information insights into action. So for instance, we work with a number of JEF-funded programs, such as Islands, that is supporting 33 island nations on sustainable low and non-chemical development through knowledge management services that combine both. So the use of digital solutions, including what you probably see here on the slide, our Green Forum that is hosting multiple online communities of practice, but also various forms of knowledge exchange and dialogue opportunities. Maybe to conclude, in terms of the vision that we have, we think knowledge partnerships, digital solutions, and engagement opportunities enable organizations and platforms within and beyond the UN system to share and enable access to actionable knowledge and best practices on circular economy. And that's the way for us to ensure that a coherent, interconnected green and circular economy knowledge grows in value over time and grows in visibility. So that those best practices, innovations, opportunities are recognized, are known and adapted, and eventually scaled up to trigger the systemic changes that are needed.
Thank you very much for a very high level but thorough intervention. And as I promised you, we're going to open questions from the public, and I already received them via 4 messages, and I don't know if you want to note to write it down, because I'm just going to, whoever can actually answer, please speak up. So the first question is, how can we better align scientific solutions with national and municipal waste management policies to ensure rapid adaptation and regularity support for new technology? The second question, which finance models have proven most effective for early stage circular economy innovation, and how can small and mid-sized enterprises partner with larger institutions to de-risk investments? The third question, how can we better align scientific solutions with national and municipal waste management policies to ensure rapid adoption and regulation support for new technologies? And lastly, what frameworks already exist to support cross-border partnerships for circular economy technologies, and how can emerging solutions like plastic to biofuel models be integrated or scaled across multiple countries? So all of them are excellent questions, actually. So who wanna take on the first question? How better we can align scientific knowledge, or which finance model, or how can we better align scientific solutions, or what framework? Probably the last question, I will leave it to Fabian online, but what do you think?
Okay, so thank you very much. I believe that the example I gave, talking about how to use the waste management support system, is one clear example. It's one clear example where science comes very close to policy, because data generation itself is also science, and through data generation, you are able to provide evidence-based information, and that evidence-based information tend to refine the kind of policies that you have, so that you are able to focus on where there is a need, where the gap exists, and where you need to provide solutions. Beyond that, science will have to always work closely with policy, because there is no way science will achieve results without policy. If we have all the scientific information, if you have all the scientific data, and you do not translate that, into something useful that will benefit society, then it's as good as not having it. And so there has to always be that kind of relationship between science and policy. And since these things are dynamic and always revolving, it's important to continue to research into them, in order to always have the most recent, best information that is needed for decision making. And I believe that that is the way you need to link science with national policy. The challenge for most countries, including Ghana, has been the fact that we don't have that kind of strong linkage. And I believe that that is how come we have welcomed the waste management support system as an initial step, to try to bridge that gap by generating the needed data and analyzing it very well in order to support decision making. So that is the one on size. You talked about the other one on financing.
On finance, which financing model have proven most effective without reading the whole question?
It's difficult for me if I want to situate this in the context of Ghana. Why do I say so? In Ghana, the model that we are currently using is a private sector-led model, where the government enters into contractual arrangements with the private sector. The private sector is supposed to ensure collection of the waste, transporting the waste to either a treatment plant or to a landfill. And the private sector is also responsible for collecting fees for the waste that they collect. So it's the private sector that goes around households, ensuring that they register and they pick the waste. I think it has not been very efficient. The reason is because you cannot use market systems for waste management. Waste management is a public good. Therefore, you cannot place so much of that burden onto the private sector. The government needs to come in. That's what I think. The government needs to provide the needed infrastructure. The government needs to provide the needed subsidies in order to aid the private sector to be able to assist government in managing waste. So I cannot clearly say that one particular model has worked for us. We are trying to see how we can combine models in order to see how we can have results. But as it is now, the kind of model that we are rolling out in Ghana, which is private sector-led process, is not working effectively because the private sector is not even having legal mandates to be able to collect the fees. So if they go to the households and they have to collect the fees and they are having challenges in collecting the fees, they do not even have that legal mandate to insist. So there are some deficiencies there. And so we need to combine models. I don't think any particular single model may be enough, but maybe a combination of different models may work.
Thank you. Very well, private partnership. Thank you. Chair Mayor, do you have an addition? Probably you can answer multiple questions, but I do need to run back to Fabian on one question. Please go ahead.
Just to add something on question number one, I think the public participation in the policy for the development and implementation will also help. So the question number two regarding the financial model, for now, I think there is no the best or the efficiency model that we can present. But in my country, we are using the PPP, public-private participation for the management of the waste things. And to the question number three, the best approach is the citizen science approach and integration of all stakeholders. So that's what I can say.
Thank you. Very well said. Yes. I'm going to turn to our colleague online, Ms. Fabi. I hope you can hear us.
I can hear you.
Yes. Did you hear that question about frameworks that already exist?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Rula. I think, well, the question of innovation and cooperation is very key for circular economy. There are several platforms and alliances and networks at global, at regional levels that are designed to support cooperation between countries and also collaboration between different sectors of society. I think making innovation more visible in general is indeed challenging because, as we said and as we heard, there is so much happening, there is so much out there, but there is also an ocean of information and an ocean that is really difficult to navigate, and where innovation, can be struggling to find visibility. And so that's why what we do in GDKP, we're trying to really, again, build that network and that common platform for multiple sources of knowledge, or multiple knowledge providers, if we can call them this way, to collaborate and help us, in a way, identify innovation and make sure it's visible, make sure it's accessible, and can be uptaken in dedicated circular economy platforms and cooperation schemes. But innovation is really, really key, being able to keep track of what is being done, what is being tested, and how we are learning from those experiences. What is the potential? That is really the type of knowledge that we want to collect and to help make more visible.
Thank you, Ms. Fabian. I don't think we have time. No? Okay. Okay, please join me in acknowledging and thanking our distinguished panelists and their answers, their intervention, most intriguing and most innovative. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm gonna do a quick wrap and a call to institutionalize knowledge sharing as a global public good. And to Ms. Alyssa for final words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me start by thanking our two amazing moderators, Ruda and Adriana, who have been keeping us on time. And let me also extend my thanks to all the UNEP colleagues here in the room and online that have made this event working so smoothly and taking care of whatever technical difficulty that we have encountered. And again, a great thank to all the speakers who have been really delivering extremely interesting interventions during today. And I also want to acknowledge that there's an equivalent number of participants online that have been following the session and participating, I believe, with some of the questions. So let me thank also all of them for having had the stamina to stay with us throughout the event and do not even enjoy the cocktail that we're going to have at the end of this session. And I hope for all of you, it has been an interesting, this is really scary, this big picture still. It has been a very interesting session, and that as I have learned something new, you also have had the chance to learn something new by listening to the different interventions. There's a couple of things that stayed with me of the different interventions that we have heard. One is the importance of making sure that our data, our knowledge, the standards are something that becomes accessible to people so that they can operate on the basis of that information. And this becomes the basis for our trajectories. Our youth speaker has reminded us the importance of seeing what we want to be, want to have in the future in 10, 20, 50 years. And obviously that all starts from understanding where we are coming from. But also what we have heard from many interventions, including in these very final sessions, is that data and knowledge are very important. but one needs incentives and motivations to transform it into action. So bringing that science, that data together with economics and a good knowledge of what triggers behavior change is really essential. I will try to just give a snippet of all the initiatives and platforms that we have heard of today. We have had our colleague Sally reminded us of the World Environment Situation Room and Environment GTP. We have heard from Adam the role that environmental data plays in ISO standards and some of the efforts that are being made to facilitate navigating through an ISO standard. Shakira, you have reminded us of how important life cycle assessments are to design policies and particularly extended producer responsibilities. Daniel, you have told us that soon ICC and Systemic are going to advance the work on the Global Materials Data Hub. And in this very final session, we have heard about some very specific tailored knowledge management system. Fabian, you have reminded us of the work of the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership. Peter, you have reminded us of the work associated with creating coherence at national level on waste management. And Jean-Marie, of how knowledge management is useful to orient the work on a number of sectors. And I know you have also been working specifically in view of creating that coherence of knowledge in the mining sector. But we have also heard the importance of networks and partnership to test that knowledge and that data on the ground and to create what from the first session we have heard, feedback loop. What works, what doesn't work, what are we learning from using knowledge and data. So I just conclude by reminding us that what we have heard today is the importance of networks, of partnerships, the importance of connecting them. There's many in the room, there's probably even more globally. So we do have an opportunity to really bring together knowledge, bring together data, and make it more accessible to people. And at this point, I can really close and I can really invite all of us to the cocktail that is going to take place on the 9th floor. And I'm just going to ask speakers who are still in the room if they can join me here so that we can take a picture of everybody who has been at the event today. Again, thank you very much for being with us.
One small announcement, if you parked in the hotel today, and if you go to the reception, they'll validate your parking for you from this event. But please, we'll go to the reception. Thanks. Oh, picture first.